How long have you been following Army and Navy games before you wrote the book?
Well, I grew up in New York City, and I went to Army games as a kid with my family. And then when I got to the Washington Post, I started covering Navy in both football and basketball. I covered the David Robinson teams. I'm dating myself, but I did. So I had relationships and feelings for both schools before I wrote the book in 95. And felt as if I kind of had an advantage because I knew something about them both going in, and then was able to develop great relationships with the players on both teams as the season went on.
Now, the copyright on the book is 96, so in some regards it's celebrating its 25th anniversary.
It is.
Although you started working on it in 95. I'm just going to come out and say it, it's a hell of a piece of work. Talk to me a little bit about what it took to put that book together. A ton of detail.
Detail's what I do. I mean, that's what I've always done. I had an editor on one book who kept writing in the margins too much detail. And I finally called him and I said, if you think there's too much detail in here, you can't edit me, because detail is what I do. And that's what I tried to do with the Civil War, as with all my other books. And I was lucky because Army kids and Navy kids are so bright, and they're so well read, and they're so outgoing as a group, that it was actually easy to get them to open up and talk to me.
Now, talk to me a little bit about the structure in terms of what it took to get that. You were at practices, you followed games. It seemed like you went and camped out with Navy maybe one week and Army the next week.
Yeah.
How much work went into all of that?
Well, there was a lot of travel involved, but I spent a lot of time going back and forth. But sometimes I would be one school Monday and another school Tuesday, depending on the week and who they were playing and things like that. There were a couple times I was able to get to both games on a given Saturday because of logistics, so that helped too. But what was key for me was the access. Both coaches gave me total access to their teams, to practices, to team meetings. I was on the sidelines at every game. I think I'm the only person in history who wasn't president of the United States who was in both locker rooms during an Army-Navy game, which is something I like to brag about. So the access that I was given by both schools and by the coaches and players was absolutely critical.
So let's talk about what you have learned about this contest in the last, I don't know how many decades, but let's just date it in terms of your book, say 25 years. Looking back over the last 25 years and however many Army games you want to add as a kid, what can you say about this? Has it changed? Is it still the same Civil War?
I think I could write a Civil War on any year of Army and Navy, and the book would be similar. The storylines would be different. The kids would be different, but it would basically be the same. Young men who want to play Division I football, who frequently are overlooked by other schools, who come and play with a chip on their shoulders, who love football, and who understand that when they graduate, 99% of the time, the only uniform they're going to wear is an Army uniform, a Navy uniform, or a Marine uniform, not an NFL uniform. There are exceptions, of course. Roger Staubach, most notably, Napoleon McCallum, and Andrew Villanueva's had a very successful career in Pittsburgh and Baltimore, but they're the exceptions.
So if I remember the thing, and I've heard you complain in the past, you've done lots of interviews, but the people never read the books. If I remember, Army won the year of that book, and you followed a number of different players, but at the end you talked about two brothers, one on Army and one on Navy, who embrace at the end of that book. I'm kind of curious if you could hit on three things for me. What have you learned about the Brotherhood? What have you learned about just the contest? What is it about this game that makes it special?
Well, I mean, the fact that they are, in fact, comrades in arms when they're not playing football against each other. I went to a 25th reunion for the book the night before the game in New York City, and the two players you're talking about, Jim Cantaloupe, the Army captain, and Andrew Thompson, the Navy captain that year, were both there. And they're both very good friends. They were at each other's weddings. In fact, Cantaloupe came down to Navy for Andrew Thompson's graduation. And there were a bunch of Army and Navy guys there, hugging one another, telling old war stories, not literally, thank God, although some of them have deployed. And there's a bond. There's a unique bond, because I've always said only a cadet can really have an understanding of what a midshipman goes through, and only a midshipman can have an understanding of what a cadet goes through, and that's absolutely true.
All right, and then last but not least, and I reserve the right to add one more after that. What do I want to ask you that I'm thinking about? So I want to tell you a story. So it turns out my best friend's dad was known as Killer Gregory as a black knight in the 50s. He happened to be one of the few that went through the 50s and wasn't caught up in the scandal then. Later in life, he was teaching at Navy, and for some reason at the Navy pep rally, they asked him, Killer Gregory, to speak on Army's behalf at the Navy pep rally. Anyway, he gets up in full parade dress, and he says, sometimes in combat, it's the element of surprise that makes a difference. Rips open his jacket, and it says, "Go Army, beat Navy," at a Navy pep rally.
Sure.
I'm just kind of curious, how many of those stories have you come?
Well, Army-Navy is the only college sporting event I know of where the two schools have a banquet together the night before the game. You have Army people on one side of the room, Navy people on the other side of the room, but they cheer for each other. One year, I think it was the 100th anniversary of the game, they brought back all the living Heisman Trophy winners from the two schools, and each was cheered by both sides. Roger Staubach went last, and he said, the proudest moment of my football career was running through the tunnel for Super Bowl 12 and hearing the PA announcer say, "From the United States Naval Academy, quarterback Roger Staubach." And I'm not sure there was a dry eye in the house. Certainly mine weren't.
All right, terrific. Anything you've always wanted to say about the Civil War that you haven't gotten a chance? Do you think about it often? You have so many books. I mean, which one of your books?
I do think about A Civil War is probably my favorite book among all of those that I've written. I just recently published a book on race in sports, which is probably going to be my most controversial book and I think my most important book because of the subject matter, because it's still such a huge issue in our country. But A Civil War is a book I'm really proud of, again, because of the kids, now men, that I wrote about, the relationships that I've had through the years with all of them, really. I mean, there were 45 seniors on the two teams, and I've been in touch at certain times with all but one of them, because Kevin Norman, who went to Army and died overseas in 2002. The rest of them I've been in touch with ever since. And I love it when I have people come up to me and say, "I went to Army or I went to Navy because I read your book." That makes me feel great.